and welcome back to Dr. Mandy Unedited, the podcast where I talk all about writing, research, and academic realness. I'm Dr. Mandy, researcher and editor, and hey, guess what? Last week you might or might not have noticed that I missed an episode, and it is because I was sick and my voice was so froggy. I think it's still a little bit froggy today, but hopefully you can bear with me. Today, I'm going to answer some of the most common questions that I get asked on social media and as an editor, and hopefully some of these answers will help you with your PhD journey. I get asked these questions all of the time, and honestly, these are just like all a handful of questions I've been asked in this last week alone. So we're gonna do that, but first let's do a couple of housekeeping things and some goss. Okay, so housekeeping things is yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, the best way to do that usually is through my TikTok, and my TikTok is at Life with Dr. Mandy, and so that is Doctor is Dr. and Mandy is Mandie. You can always slide into my DMs and ask any questions that you would like, but I would also like to announce something pretty exciting, which is that I have just started a Discord for all of these good kind of questions, okay? So my Discord is called the People PhD Pod, and so that stands for the People Pursuing Higher Degrees Pod. The link for that is going to be in the description below, so make sure that you check that out. And the purpose of this Discord is just to help people to get answers to questions that they might have from people who understand the process. So I am planning on adding not only myself, but a few other more highly expert than myself people that can, just log on to Discord and just casually answer your questions. You can log on and casually ask questions as need be. And then I'd also like to probably start doing a once a month call for those of us that would like that kind of talking interaction. I had some people suggest to do this past week, so that's what I've done. So make sure in the description below you check out the People PhD Pod, and yeah, let's get it burning in there. Let's ask all of our questions, okay? As for the goss this week, look, this past week was Halloween. And yeah, I guess let's just talk about what's been going on in our Halloween style. So, one of the things that I find is funny from, being an American that lives in the UK is that people all the time in the UK ask me all about American Halloween. And when I talked about this earlier in this week on my TikTok, I think a lot of the people from the UK thought I meant like Halloween originated in America, and that's not what I mean. I know like there's origins in other places. I believe Scotland and some other, maybe even Ireland. I forgot. I did a little research on it, to be honest with you, and now it's completely left my head. But I meant like the American culture of Halloween. I think so many people in the UK see these movies and things about Halloween in America, and they think it's so cool and so great, and then they want to really, just try to emulate that excitement in the UK, and I think that they do a pretty good job over here. I think that I do. I kind of miss, like the UK is quite compacted when it comes to like houses and stuff like that. So you don't see as many decorations. I do miss kind of seeing those really big yard, I don't know, displays of all of like the spooky skeletons and stuff. I remember when I would run in the US, sometimes I would get up early in the morning and run in the dark. And if people had Halloween displays with like spooky lights and stuff on them, sometimes you found yourself like face to face with a skeleton or, a werewolf or something really freaky like that. And so that was fun. But I do really love Halloween in the UK as well. I mean, you get to do all the little trick-or-treaters. They're so cute when, somebody's knocking on your door and you can't even see out the window who it is because they're so short. And I also love the Halloween parties. So this year I was a cheerleader. I just thought like I would be something very stereotypical American. And I never was actually a cheerleader growing up, so that's what I did. I was a cheerleader, and my husband, I guess he was a quarterback. Who knows? He tried to be a quarterback. He had a jersey, but then he has like this closet of wigs from random fancy dress. That's what they call it in the UK. They call it fancy dress when you dress up in a costume. So he has all of these wigs, and he got like this crazy one and the Viper sunglasses out. And yeah, I guess he went as a quarterback, I guess. I don't know. He said he was a skater boy, but I don't know. Yeah, it was confusing. Anyway, I had a really great time for Halloween. Got to eat lots of candy, went to a couple of parties, and now we're just set for the rest of the year. It's going to be rolling in quickly. Here in the UK, we got Guy Fawkes Night coming up, Remembrance coming up this next week, and then we have well, I mean, now Thanksgiving's kind of out of the picture for me, but as soon as it was October 31st, Christmas is now up everywhere in the stores. So I'm excited for the UK Christmas time of year because they really do go hard. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into some of these questions. So like I said, I get asked these questions a lot, and I just picked a bunch of questions I've been asked like only in this last week. So hopefully answering some of these will help you out. I know I've talked about some of these before in like entire podcast episodes, but you just never know who is going to pop in where on the timeline of your podcast or your social media and ask the same questions. So first question is how do I come up with a good research question? Generally, you probably already have some ideas in mind for what you want to study. So I would suggest just going ahead and brainstorming, maybe 5 or 6 ideas that you have. They don't have to be, specific right now, but the end goal is that we need something that is going to be specific and actionable and is going to get us good results. So specific means we're going to need to figure out specific people we're studying in a specific place that we're going to study on a specific topic, all right? But when we're initially just trying to think of an idea, just brainstorm 5 or 6 ideas within your field that you think that might be really interesting. Then go and look at all those ideas and engage what like your level of interest in each of those ideas are going to be, because this is going to be your topic for a really long time, and you don't want to get bored halfway through your topic and just lose all motivation. So look at those topics, figure out which ones are most interesting, and then maybe stick with like the top 3 of those topics. Next, you want to narrow it down. So this is where it's important to go check out the literature on, the few ideas that you now have. And when you're checking the literature, you really want to look at like what has been done, what hasn't been done, who has been studied, who hasn't been studied, what area, what framework, all of those details have been studied versus what has not been studied, and see how much literature you're coming up with on each topic. If you are not finding a lot of literature on a topic, it is going to be a massive headache for you down the road. So ensure that whatever the topic is, you are finding some good works, all right? And so once you kind of look and you see what kind of material is out there on it, then go ahead and, yeah, I mean, this is kind of like a dwindling down process, isn't it? Go ahead and maybe like get down to like two or three really good ideas. Then focus on making it specific. And so I like to talk about the who, what, where, when, why method. I don't know. I made this up a while ago, and this is what I go by. So when you have a couple of, topics that you've researched and that you think that could be possible, we got to make them specific. So now you need to ask, Who are you researching? What is going to be your target group or population? What are you studying? And what is the area of focus, the phenomenon, or the problem? Where is the research taking place? This is defining the setting. When is your research going to apply? So this might refer to a time period, a developmental stage, or a life event. And then why? Why is this research important? Why is the purpose or what is this purpose or significance of this research? Okay, so let me give you a little bit of an example of what it means to go from like a broad topic into a more specific topic. So maybe you're interested in exploring maybe like mental health in young people. So that's a pretty broad topic, right? So you're gonna look at the literature and you're gonna see what is like the specific things of the who, what, where, when, and why that have not been studied in that area, in that parameter, right? So if we're looking at youth, maybe you notice maybe youth aged like 16 to 24 in the LGBTQIA plus group have not been studied when it comes to mental health. When we're talking about what mental health is a very broad topic, right? So maybe we're talking about experiences of accessing mental health support services. When we're talking about where, if we're just looking at the UK, that's so broad, right? Maybe we're talking about urban cities in I don't know, South Central UK. I'm just thinking about where London is, y'all. But when we're talking about when, a lot of these mental health crises and things like that have become really a big thing post COVID. So maybe we're only looking at the experiences post COVID. And then why, we got to ask ourselves, why do we want to understand this? To maybe understand the barriers and improve services. So then our research question might be could go from like, what are the experiences of youth in mental health in the UK to what are the experiences of LGBTQIA plus youth in urban UK areas when accessing mental health support post the COVID-19 pandemic. So now I have a very specific and actionable question that is going to be used to understand the barriers and how to improve mental health support services. The next question would be, what counts as credible resources for research? So we're talking about literature here. I get asked this all the time, and I'm kind of surprised how many people are confused about this. So that's why it's important to talk about it, all right? So when we're talking about information that we want to use within our research when we are writing our dissertation or thesis, of course, our number one is that we want peer-reviewed journal articles. Other sources might be scholarly books published by, like a reputable scholar or, academic publisher. Other things might be information from a government website, a .org, or an edu. And when you're searching for this information, a really important thing to keep in mind is that you really want to use things that have been published within the past 5 years. And you might even want to think, if you're doing this for your PhD, you might want to think, what is my projected date for the end of my PhD? And then, only use resources that will be within 5 years of that. Because here is the thing. Number one, if people get delayed on their PhD programs, sometimes they've already written a bunch of stuff early on that is no longer considered valid because too many of their research sources are now currently not within the last 5 years. But also, it's really important to use most recent research because there's a lot of fields where research is changing even quicker than 5 years, like the standard of things like tech and AI, for example. The standard for those a couple of years ago are completely different now. So the most credible information is going to be the most recent information, but you also want to keep in mind that that recent information could change. The only reason that you want to use older sources is probably just in case there was something like that was really foundational to your topic that helped kind of bloom a lot of other research within the topic that's important to explain in your study. And, scholarly material on things like frameworks and methodologies, obviously, those books might be a little bit older as well. But you might be asking yourself, when is it okay to use material that is not necessarily a scholarly source? Well, you can use material like, books that are not necessarily academic books or, websites when you want to maybe create the context of something within your research. So, for example, I remember I did this during my PhD. I studied homeschool co-ops, and when I was writing my PhD, the first series of the documentary Happy Shiny People came out, and so I used sources from the reviews of that documentary to help create the context of, like, what is the stereotypes, or what are the concerns of homeschooling in, the cultural context, which, like, people say things like, well, homeschooling is heavily religious or philosophical based. Homeschooling can, cover up abuse happening within a household and things like that. So you can use those not so scholarly sources just to help create some like social or cultural context around your topic, but they are not being used to back up, evidence, things that should be evidence-based claims. Next question I was asked this last week was, what if I don't feel smart enough to do a PhD? And one of the biggest things that I learned in my PhD and in like the research world is that, like, that's how everyone feels. You are not alone in thinking that, maybe I'm not smart enough, maybe I'm not good enough to do this. Even like the person that you think has all of their stuff together has no idea sometimes about, what's going on in the PhD program. And so if you find yourself not feeling smart enough, just think that, like, this process is not meant to be the same for everyone, even though I think that we give it a lot of lofty ideals that this is supposed to be like, the extremely intelligent of the extremely intelligent. In reality, we are all just people, just curious about the world and curious about life. And also, you'll probably start to find, especially post your PhD, that the research process is not always, this like streamlined, highly intellectual process. Sometimes it really can be a lot more casual. So, I feel that if you really don't feel like you are smart enough, just go and check your imposter syndrome, okay? Because you do not want to let that hold you back. Okay, next, how do I deal with a supervisor who's never available? I hear this so often. I think that especially when we're getting into more of these online programs that people are doing, supervisors are really just like these kind of just bodies that are almost meant to just sit there and kind of like grade papers, and that's it. And so, unfortunately for the student, that means that you're often not going to get a lot of interaction from a supervisor. It could also be like, supervisors are being given like a billion other students to handle, and it's just difficult for them to handle everything. So if you have a supervisor that is never available, this is why I say that it's so important for you to make connections with people like me, make connections with your peers. I often have people reach out to me and say, like, hey, I can't get a hold of my supervisor, I'm not sure what to do. And I go, use my links that I have in various universities, and, link them up with other staff members that can help them. But also, sometimes, when you're linking up with people outside of your university, getting into research groups or collaborating online on social media or whatnot, sometimes that can help you feel so much more confident in your research process. So I know I'm not really answering, like how do I deal with a supervisor that's never available, but I would say don't be stagnant because you don't have that supervisor to lean upon. Really, you have to take it in your own hands if you want to be successful in a PhD most of the time. And so if you have somebody that is not necessarily supporting you in the way that you need, you have to take it into your hands and you have to go find those people that will support you. And so, that's why I say, like, anytime someone reaches out to me, I'm 1000% happy to, like, to help them out because I understand, what the dynamics on both sides are. But, like, I understand that, you can't, like, find yourself in kind of a stall, and I want to help move you forward. Okay, next question is what is the best way to organize my literature review? So, before you start a literature review, the first thing I would suggest is go and download Zotero. This is a literature organization tool that helps you keep all of your literature in one place and you can just see it all in one window instead of 80 billion windows. So, yeah, first of all, know your tools. And also, I would create a spreadsheet for your materials. So, what I would do is just make a spreadsheet and at the top have things just like author, date, main points, abstract, things like that to kind of help you just understand at a glance what each paper is going to be about. And having a spreadsheet along with Zotero is going to be really helpful to, for you to understand what is going to be included in your literature review. So, when you start out with a literature review, what I would do is first, yeah, just search for literature and be sure that number one, you want to you want to look in various search engines and you want to make sure that you're using synonyms for, your keywords. So, for example, again, if I'm studying homeschooling, I want to use terms like home education, schooling from home, family, homeschool group, or lots of different kind of words. Don't just only search the keywords that are in your topic or in your question. And as you're finding those sources, yeah, I would go ahead and I would make an inclusion and exclusion criteria. You could just write it down on a Word document and then go back and look at your spreadsheet and start to, see what the inclusions are going to be. And once you have a really good list of sources, next what I would do is go ahead and start grouping those sources by themes or by topic. So when you have, a topic, you should have maybe, three or five or even a little bit more than that resources or papers on that topic. And that topic kind of becomes one of the headings that you're going to have in your literature review. So once you kind of have those topics and you have people, papers grouped or themed within those topics, next you want to ask yourself, what are they all agreeing with and what are they all disagreeing with? I can't say this enough. A literature review is not about summarizing, it is about synthesizing. And so when you are getting ready to talk about, the existing literature on your research, you need to be talking about what everyone is agreeing with on a certain topic. And so if you want, as you're starting to write the literature review, you can treat it as, smaller papers if you want to, based on different topics. I would suggest maybe having like 3 to 5 overall topics that you're going to discuss. And then, of course, you're going to have maybe a few headings underneath each of those topics to discuss all of those little segues. But yeah, I mean, for this works for some people is treating it as writing a smaller paper papers. And I would probably suggest going that way if you're kind of new, because when you go back and you look at like how is the flow of the literature review going to look, then when you have these like bigger chunks of information, then you can see how they all fit together and what order you're going to put them in, and then maybe even kind of visualize what the transition is going to be between those. So yeah, literature review. Get your papers organized. Do not go into it all willy-nilly. Make sure you make yourself a spreadsheet. Organize your topics, yeah, by theme. And then, yeah, maybe consider, I know it's probably not for everyone, but consider looking at your literature review as smaller chunks rather than this giant chapter that you have to write. And then my last question for today is, how do I manage a research project when I feel stuck? So first of all, if you start feeling stuck in a project, really ask yourself, why are you feeling stuck? Are you feeling stuck because you're tired, you're unmotivated, your brain is just cluttered and you don't know where to go? If you're saying, ah, yeah, that's kind of me, then you might actually be experiencing a little bit of burnout. And so I think it would be important to take a second to take a step back, take a fresh breath of air, and then, get some rest, eat some food, and just give yourself the grace to be able to take that break and come back to it another day. Because I think a lot of times when we are feeling stuck, it is simply just because we don't realize that we're burned out and our brain is just really trying to not let us make progress because we don't know it, but it's just yelling for us to take a break. So make sure that you're really conscious about, yeah, taking care of yourself during the process. But maybe you're not only feeling stuck because of that. Maybe you're feeling stuck because, yeah, you have a supervisor that's not helpful. You can't get the right permissions that you need, or you can't find the right material that you want to write on. And I think when that happens, yeah, you just kind of have to think of like, well, what can I do in the meantime? So yeah, if you have it, maybe, yeah, like a supervisor that's not being helpful and getting back to you on a certain question, maybe like in your methodology or something like that. Just think like, okay, well, what else can I do in the meantime while I'm trying to figure that out? Maybe you can go back and write a little bit on your literature review. If you're feeling stuck, if you're not getting the feedback that you want, if you have vague direction, again, reach out to other people. Go find a community somewhere, whether it's in person or online. I mean, like social media, like TikTok or Discord or Instagram. I mean, like, to me, when I first started doing social media, I just didn't think anyone's going to be interested in the PhD program, only to find out that there's so many people talking about their PhD programs on there. So go find that group that's going to help you get that mentorship that you need. And then one thing that, like I really struggle with that holds me back sometimes is perfectionism. And I think a lot of us could kind of identify with that. But, I am like, I don't know where I got this perfectionism from, but I started it probably somewhere around my PhD program. And, sometimes it really delays things because I'm thinking about how can I get this one thing perfect before I send it off. And, I've really had to practice just being like, okay, well, what is going to make this not just like good enough, like, oh, it's just good enough, I'll send it, but like, what is going to make this like a good quality of something to turn in that is not going beyond, like, what are the beyond factors that are making it that over perfectionist feel? And so I've really spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, I know that to get this done, I need to do A, B, and C. But in my head, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could do this and maybe I could do this as well. It's really a struggle, but I have to limit myself on all those extra details that I'm thinking that are going to make that perfect, because that perfectionism, yeah, really can be a driver again towards burnout, and I don't need that in my life, right? So if you're a perfectionist like me, make sure that you understand, like what would meet the requirements of an assignment or a paper or a writing, but then what is doing too much? What is doing the most? All right, y'all. Well, I hope that helped answer some of your questions. Again, yeah, if you've got questions that you need asked, feel free to find me over on the TikTok at Dr. Mandy, or sorry, at Life with Dr. Mandy. And then, yeah, if you are interested, try to check out my Discord. It's called the People PhD Pod. So that's the People Pursuing Higher Degrees Pod, and the link to that is available in the description below. In the meantime, if you need any editing services, I edit everything from dissertations to theses to coursework to journal articles and books and all that good things. Like I don't know where my English is. The end of the day when I'm recording this, y'all, it's all out the window. But anyway, if you would like some help with that, feel free to reach out to me through my email, mandykf@gmail.com. So that's MANDIE kangaroo foxtrot at gmail.com. Otherwise, you can go check out my website, www.drmandyedits.com. I've just added a bunch of new stuff to my website, so make sure you go check that out, because I put a bunch of resources on there for researchers and PhDers and all that good stuff. So check that out on my media page. You can also find out what other wonderful podcasts I've been a guest on there. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask them, because you are the only person that is going to make you successful in this PhD journey. But I wish you all the luck. Okay, see ya. Goodbye.